Doug Hershey, great to have you in Israel Now podcast. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to this.
And where are you exactly right now? In Israel or
right.
in the States?
I'm in the States. When I'm stateside, I live in Maine. But of course, been traveling, even just this year, been traveling back and forth quite a bit to Israel.
Mm. Now, this brings us straight into our subject. There has been a dramatic things happening in Israel since we spoke last time, or before actually, since we talked about your visit to Finland, war in Gaza. What do you think about the situation, and what are your thoughts on that situation?
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate for sure. And it's been dragging on, as we all know. It's been sort of dragging on and on and on. Since October 7th, much of Israel has really been challenged. I mean, this has been an unwanted war from the beginning, and with 350,000 reservists called up to defend their homes, defend their communities, it's really left quite a hole in a lot of the Jewish communities, especially within agriculture, and that's some of where our teams have been coming in to help with agricultural harvest and planting and just sort of a maintenance. I mean, you can imagine if you left your home for 5 or 6 months and returned, what a mess that would be, and now translate that into farms and food production and things like that. So we've been helping to do that, to kind of get some of those farms back online, to help with agricultural processes, even more than just harvest. And as a result, that's been able to help get some food back to market, both for Jewish and Arab communities.
Interesting. Now that you mentioned describe a little bit about your ministry before we talk about the books and about your upcoming visit to Finland. So what is your ministry doing?
Yeah, so I have two things. One, I'm an author of some photo books, of which I know we'll talk about in just a moment. But also, I have a travel company called Ezra Adventures, and in Hebrew, Ezra or Ezra means help. And years ago, I started it with the intention of helping to connect believers to a lot of the needs in Israel. Israel is a very difficult place to live. And we're really in a time like Ezra where Jewish people are returning home. Many of them are secular, and part of Ezra's job was to help connect the people back to the land and to their history and to really to their God. And so part of what we've been doing, especially since October 7th, after COVID, of course, travel companies sort of, everything got put on hold. But really in the last 8 or 9 months, we've been taking groups specifically to help. So we've been taking 10-day groups, 10-day trips, not as tourism so much, but really to help. So it's been specific small group travel of 10, maybe 12 people at the most. I like to have a smaller group where we can be as local as possible. And we're trying to arrange all of our travel costs, including lodging and food, to be as local as possible. So in other words, if we're working in a particular moshav or a farming community, and we can get an Airbnb somewhere nearby or a local place to stay, then that way our lodging goes to local families who have that, or local communities, and we're shopping locally as well. So my last several groups, we were about a mile or two from Gaza and about a mile from Egypt. So if you are familiar with the map of Israel, in the very far southwest corner of the state. And really, there was no hotels for at least an hour or so. So we were staying locally, eating locally, and of course working with local farmers. So of those 10-day trips, we have probably 6 to 7 days are specifically focused on work teams and to help. And then of course we'll take a couple days to do Jerusalem and the Galilee to connect with some of the biblical history and roots of the nation for sure. But these are primarily not so much tourism trips, but really to come and to help support the nation of Israel in very practical ways.
That's very, very interesting. So you have a very hands-on kind of work as far as Israel is concerned. So when and how did you become interested in prophecy and in how the ancient prophecies are being fulfilled in Israel? Have you always been interested in the scriptures like that?
Well, I think a lot of people, or like a lot of people, you read the scriptures about the prophets and about perhaps things to come, and everybody's kind of fascinated by that God would speak things ahead of time to prepare His people for what was coming, and for a lot of times, I think when we read that, or when we haven't visited Israel, you tend to read it in sort of an allegorical or metaphorical sort of way, and meaning that instead of looking at something exactly as it says, we look at ways to apply those principles to our lives, and I think that's great. For me, I often tell our groups, and we'll be talking about it when I'm in Finland as well, is that for me, for the amount of time that I've been in Israel, and prior to COVID, I was living in Israel probably 5 to 6 months of the year. And the longer that I'm in Israel, I've become very much of a Bible realist, or a Bible literalist in terms of the land. And I say that because, instead of reading things as, Jerusalem being a faraway city from Bible stories, it's a real place with real people and real problems, but also real prophecies and destinies that are really starting to unfold. And so I've been able to see it from a very practical sense, and I'm showing my groups this specifically as well as we go and work. When the Bible says that the deserts will bloom like a rose, they are. And when it says the waste and forgotten cities will be rebuilt, that's happening as well. And it talks about the Jewish people returning from all over the world back to the land that was promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Against all odds and against any type of historical comparison, that is also happening. And so I'm able to see Bible prophecy unfold in a very tangible and practical way. And, in a way where when you read the scriptures, it becomes really clear, like God is not speaking in allegory. God is not speaking in mystery. He's telling us exactly what's going to happen. And we're able to see that unfold in a very practical sense. So when I have groups that are in Israel, of course, I love to show that aspect of it. And when I'm teaching around the United States and other places like I will in Finland, there are there's photographic evidence and videos that I can show you to say, like, here's what the prophets talked about. And this is exactly what is happening in Israel. This is the location. This is the spot. These are how things are unfolding. And so just the amount of time that I've been in Israel, I've really, just sort of from my own interest and own biblical studies, I've been able to see how Bible prophecy and current events, and not just news events, but things that are happening in the land are blending in the most perfect ways, and just, you know, in a very tangible sense. And to me, that's special, because that means that God is doing exactly what he said he would do, and the things that he said is exactly what he meant. And to me, that's really special. I mean, that's a really faith building and trust building aspect of the scriptures.
And this, what is exciting here is that you have photographic evidence of how the prophecies have unfolded in our times. And let me just quickly show to our viewers your two books. I have both of them. I don't know if you have still more. Israel Rising and Jerusalem Rising. And this first one is particularly dear to me because, Doug, we met for the first time in 2018, and you signed this book for me, an NRB, and I thought you had completely forgotten me. But I think it was around a year ago when I contacted you for possibly having you here in Finland, that you did remember our brief meeting at the NRB conference. Thank you for the book, and thank you for your signature. Now,
it's hard to forget somebody who says, "Come to Finland, and we'll put you up in one of those igloos that, you know, has the glass ceilings, and you can see the northern lights." I'm like, "I'm in. When do I come?"
But I have to say that was my cousin's husband, so I cannot fulfill his promise about the igloos and the glass ceilings. But we have some other things prepared for you. Great for you. But tell us what makes these books special, and your presentation, when you have you've done these presentations and you have presented the fulfillment of the prophecy, the ancient prophecy, through a photographic lens. I think I don't know for how many years. What makes this so special, and what kind of impact does it have on people who see this?
To me, what makes it special, and again, I'm speaking for myself as an author. You know, I didn't intend to write books. You know, sometimes people grow up talking about, you know, wanting to write that novel or put together that book. That was never me. A lot of this research and a lot of this study has just sort of come out of my own interest, and again, from seeing how the Bible is unfolding in the land in a very practical way. And so, even though I've been doing a lot of these types of presentations for several years, it's not the same because things continue to happen. And what makes that unique, I think, is that when we talk about broad Bible prophecy today, it's usually in the context of what could be around the corner or what's coming, or, you know, like for right now, like, where is the war in the Middle East heading? Is it heading towards Gog and Magog? And how is that going to unfold? And what could happen around the corner? When is the temple going to be rebuilt? When we talk about Bible prophecy, we talk about future events. And when I'm talking about Bible prophecy, I'm talking about what is happening right now for the first time in 2,600 years. There is prophecies that have been lying dormant in our scriptures, from Jeremiah, Isaiah, Ezekiel, Daniel. Choose really almost any prophet. There are prophecies that are in our scriptures that have been lying dormant since the time that those prophets spoke those things, that are unfolding right now. I can take you to the hillsides. I can show you photographic evidence. I can show you video proof. A quick example of that is in Isaiah 47, I think it is, where it talks about that the Dead Sea at some point will be fresh water and men will fish out of it. And of course, we think, like, you know, that's never going to happen. How is that ever going to happen? And for the first time ever, right now in Israel, there are, and this is a longer story, but there are sinkholes that are developing around the edges of the Dead Sea, where freshwater springs are beginning to pop up, and now there's life in them for the first time. And so I've been able to document this with a video team in a course called 10 Prophecies Fulfilled in Your Lifetime, where we read the prophecy and then we go to where it's happening for the first time ever historically. So again, taking a very practical and tangible approach to exactly what the prophet said, not looking ahead 10, 20, 50 years, but looking at it right now. And so for me, when we talk about Bible prophecy, I don't, I think, like, why would we look ahead to things that are around the corner and ignore the things that the prophets talked about that are happening right now, that I can literally show you? I can show you, and part of what Israel Rising is, of course, is the then and now comparisons, what the land looked like before Israel became a nation, what it looked like now after, and how that fits into exactly what this prophecy in Ezekiel 36 talks about, meaning that when the Jewish people return to the land, the physical land will respond to their presence. And that's part of what we documented in Israel Rising. And then, of course, very similar to Jerusalem Rising, which is all just about Jerusalem and the restoration of the city of God.
Yeah, and both of these books are a photographic books. They're not just, text after text, but you went with your photographer to the places where some very old pictures were taken from the early 20th century, and then from the same location, you documented how the change has happened. I mean, it's really fascinating when I go through the pages of this book, and I think it's interesting what you said, that all the prophecies, they seem incredible until they finally come to pass, and now we can see it.
Yeah, and to me, that's part of what's really special and significant about it, and it's really also, it's how Jesus would teach his disciples about prophecy. And we often don't call it prophecy, but when we talk about prophecy, we think about, like, the things to come. And when Jesus would teach his disciples about things that were going to be coming, it was no allegory. There was no mystery. He would say, listen, guys, I'm paraphrasing, of course, but, hey, guys, the Passover is 2 days away, and the Son of Man will be handed over to the chief priests, and he'll be, abused and be crucified. But on the third day after that, he'll be raised again. Or, when they're walking down the road and the disciples turn to him and say, Lord, look at these beautiful buildings. And he says, you see all of these buildings? Not one stone will be left on another, and every one of them will be thrown down. And several years later, when the Romans conquered Jerusalem, that was the exact order, according to the Roman historian Josephus, that was the exact order that was given to the Roman army. Like, just push one stone off of another, make sure, make it look like there was never a city here. So even when Jesus is teaching his disciples, it's not about allegory or mystery or symbolic, spiritual parallelism. He's telling them exactly what's going to happen so that they're ready, so that when it happens, we know that, it's not out of God's control, that God knew this was coming, and not just knew it was coming, but prepping us ahead of time to encourage us and to build our faith, to know that even though these are troubled times, even though these are really, awful and unexpected, chaotic times, this is not out of, not only is it not out of God's hands, he's told us these things would happen ahead of time to give us peace and security, to know that, he's still the one in charge. Like, none of this is taking God by surprise. And, all the wars and all of the earthquakes and famines and all of these things that Jesus said would be coming, he said, hey, these things are just the beginning, but, don't worry about that. It's all going somewhere. And so to me, again, going back to the sort of the heart behind the photo books is to show that, hey, God told us this stuff ahead of time. In 1945, at the end of World War II, when after 6 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust, there were very few people, maybe if any, who were talking about how Israel would become an established independent nation only 3 years later, let alone survive a war of independence and all of the chaos that surrounded that. But that is one of the most repeated promises in the scriptures, spoken by almost every single prophet in the Bible. I will bring you back to the land. I will reestablish you on this land, and I will gather you from the four corners of the earth. It's one of the most repeated promises in the scriptures, and it's happening in a very tangible and fantastic way, in which 70, 80 years ago we would have never guessed this is how it would have unfolded. But this is exactly what God said would happen.
That's right. That's right. I want to ask you about something that I have noticed while you are giving your explanation is that the Old Testament prophecies are not to be treated as an allegory. Now, what would you say to such people who actually, there are theologians and Bible scholars who claim that we shouldn't treat the Old Testament prophecies that literally? Of course, you've been answering to this question partly already, but this is a very important thing, actually.
I'm sure many of your viewers and supporters and friends are familiar with replacement theology, with the idea that God is done with Israel, and now He's placed Israel in there, and Israel's not any different than anybody else right now, and it's just a part of the story. And prior to the establishment of Israel in 1948, I could understand how you could believe that. And I could understand how, you in the 1940s, believers would read the scriptures and go, and it's been, almost 2,000 years since Israel has actually been in the land. The Jewish people have been in the land as a thriving population, let alone an independent nation or an independent state. There's probably 1,800 years. It's I don't know that this is ever going to happen. But today, if the nation of Israel has shown us anything in the last 75 years, or 76 years, is that God is doing exactly what He said, against all odds and against all historical comparisons. The people are returning. I mean, all of these things are happening just as He said. The scriptures talk about not only the people returning, but when they return, they're not going to be two kingdoms. They will be one nation again. That the physical land will respond to their presence and produce for the Jewish people in a way that really hasn't ever before. That is also happening. The waste and forgotten biblical cities will be rebuilt, and we're seeing that. Again, this is part of what the story of Israel rising is, to be able to document places like Shiloh, like Jerusalem, like Haifa, like some of these places up in the Galilee that are directly connected to the biblical narrative have been lying desolate and empty, and according to historical accounts for centuries, and so. To me, I would say, for those that are still kind of wondering how all of this fits in, part of my encouragement is we need to look at history. We've separated our spiritual lives and our tangible lives, or dare I say secular lives. Like we have two different worlds that we look at. We look at the Bible, and then we look at the news, and these are two different worlds. And I'm saying right now that part of what history has shown us in the last 75 years is lining up perfectly with the biblical narrative. And so, to me, sometimes I've had sometimes people talk about Ezekiel 36 when it talks about that the land will be resown and things will respond and the Jewish people will return. And I've had people say, well, isn't that connected to the millennial reign? In somewhere in the far off future when the Lord returns and everything responds. And I say, okay, yeah, maybe. But I can show you photographic evidence for the first time in thousands of years, for the first time since Ezekiel spoke these things. Right now, today, the land is being cultivated and sown. The waste and forgotten cities are being rebuilt. The land is producing for the Jewish people in a way that it never has before. So maybe it is really talking about it. I'm just telling you that the things that Ezekiel prophesied, I can show you photographs. I can show you all of these things happening in a very tangible way. And so, sometimes, when I'm teaching, again, it's for me personally, when I'm teaching, when I'm sharing or doing these presentations, it's less about theology of what the Bible says, and it's more about history with a biblical lens to say, this is what has been unfolding in the earth. Wait a minute, let's stop and let's read the words of Jeremiah. Let's stop and read what Zechariah said would happen in Jerusalem. Let's stop and talk about what is happening in the biblical narrative. That's exactly what's happening on earth right now, and to be able to blend that. And again, from a larger perspective, we know that God loves His people, and all of us that are believers that are grafted into that whole process, and whether you're Jewish or not, according to the Bible, you are grafted into these promises. And when we are seeing God keep His promises to Israel over thousands of years, we know that if God is faithful to Israel to keep his covenants, if God's faithful to Israel, he will be faithful to you and I on a very personal level. And so to me, this becomes less about politics and less about, just sort of what theological position do you like the best. And when we see those two things blending together, we see really the faithfulness of God to keep his promises over thousands of years. And it becomes more about his character and his goodness to do exactly what he said he would do.
Besides the fact that I'm really excited about seeing your presentation, and also for Finnish people to be able to see with their own eyes what you have to show, because it's really a high quality material that I've seen both on your online course, 10 Prophecies Fulfilled, and in your photo books. But what you just mentioned actually opens up a whole new level of understanding prophecy about Israel, because it's not just that the prophets spoke about the return of the people to the land, which is usually our focus. And then we debate about whether, whether it's a biblical fulfillment or not. You are talking about several other prophecies that have also have had come to pass since the nation has returned to her land.
Yeah, I mean, just a few other examples of that is that there's, when we talk about language, there is only one language throughout human history that has been considered a dead language, meaning no one is speaking it except for, maybe in liturgical settings or, in historical concepts or in historical context. There's no language that has been a dead language that has ever been revived as a common unifying tongue for the people who originally spoke it, except for one, which is Hebrew, the language of the Jewish people, and the original language that almost 3/4 of your Bible was originally written in. And beyond that historical anomaly, there is a prophecy in Zephaniah 3 that talks about how God says he will restore the language to the people. And so not only are we talking about something that has never happened before in human history, but we're talking about something that was foretold in the scriptures that would happen later on in human history. So again, to kind of put that into context, there's no other people group on earth in any type of recorded history that has any type of ancient writings. Okay, just sort of putting the Bible aside, there's no one who has any type of ancient writings that foretell the destruction and the scattering of the people, the destruction of the land and the cities of the homeland, to be scattered through the ends of the earth, to then again come back as a common, recognizable people group from the descendants that were scattered, literally speaking the same language as their ancestors that were thrown off. So when we talk about ancient peoples, not the Romans or the Greeks or the Chinese or the Persians or Assyrians, or there's nobody who has any type of ancient writings that were foretelling that process. Only the Jewish people, and all of that, at least for Christians, all of that is recorded in the Bible, including I'm going to restore this language to the Jewish people. And all of that, as it's unfolding, again, we find these things that are really scattered all throughout the scriptures that are speaking to current events right now. So as an example for that, right now, I mean, 120 years ago, Hebrew was considered a dead language. Right now, I have an app on my phone. Millions of people around the world are now speaking it. So much so, and this is just, for me, this is a little story to illustrate that was really a special moment for me. I was with a group in the Israel Museum, which is where the Dead Sea Scrolls are held. And I just happened to overhear an Israeli guide bringing an American family, an English-speaking family that was a Jewish family that was in the land for, I think it was a daughter's bat mitzvah. And so she's 12, 13 years old. And as we're walking through, I overhear this guide turn to this girl. This little girl then says, since you're learning Hebrew for your bat mitzvah, can you read this? And he's pointing to the Dead Sea Scrolls. And she begins to read. A 12-year-old girl speaking Hebrew in America, reading the Dead Sea Scrolls from over 2,000 years ago. And I would just sort of, and she read a small portion. She struggled through it, and the guide was, of course, very kind. He's like, "That's right," and he continues to read, and I'm watching this as a beautiful illustration of exactly what we're talking about. That God not only talked about bringing His people back to the land, but reviving this language. And here I am watching watching this 12-year-old girl read portions of the Dead Sea Scroll from a language that 100 years ago was dead, but now has been revived as a common unifying tongue. And again, so like there are these real life experiences, these factual, verifiable proof of evidence that we can now point to. Really, thanks to the restoration of the nation of Israel and to all that's happened, that to me point directly back to the scriptures in a way that no other people group, no other historical nation even comes close to in terms of historical comparison. It is so unique and sets things so far apart. And really, what it does, it just drives us right back to the Bible to go, oh, this is what the prophet was talking about. This is what Amos was talking about. This is what is happening is exactly what Jeremiah said would happen. And so to me, that really is, it's almost like a treasure hunt in a way, is that as you're reading the scriptures, to be able to be familiar with history and even current events, not some of the even like the wars, but like what is happening in Israel, like how is the land responding, what are the cities like, what is happening within the land itself that is coming back to life just the way the scripture said.
And this all shows how God is faithful to His promises and to His covenants. Yeah. So even those parts of His promises and prophecies that have not yet come to pass will come to pass because He's a faithful God. So how should we view prophecy in light of what are we to expect in the future? What do you have to say to that?
Yeah, I'm with all that has happened. All of this is not the end of the story, and like this is all heading somewhere, and I'm sure we'll talk about it when we're together in Finland when we're going through these presentations, because to see some of this video and see some of this visual evidence is really amazing, but that's not the point. The point is this is a documentation that is ongoing because this is all leading somewhere. And I like to say, God isn't just restoring Jerusalem and planting some flowers and, cleaning the place up just to make it look pretty again. According to these same prophets, there is going to be a king who's going to arrive on the Mount of Olives to enter Jerusalem and to defend his people when all nations are gathered against them. And again, from a historical context, I don't know that there's ever been a time in history where the nations of the earth, all nations, are beginning to decide on what they think and what they feel about Israel, whether it's based on truth or not. But we're in a time and a season where nations are believing lies and are supporting this, some of these ridiculous claims to go to the international court about what Israel is doing. And there are nations who are withdrawing their ambassadors because Israel is committing genocide in Gaza, or they're causing everybody to, like, nations are making decisions. And these same prophets say there's going to be a time when all nations are going to be gathered. And it's in that context that a king arrives on the Mount of Olives and enters to defend his people. And for believers, for those that love the Lord and have that relationship, if you are actively waiting and praying and looking forward to the return of the Lord in a very practical sense, the scriptures talk about that context of what He's returning to. When the Lord returns, it's not to Tel Aviv or to Los Angeles or Helsinki or anything. There's one particular city, there is a particular setting, and He is returning to Jerusalem to defend His people when all nations are gathering against. And for the first time in history, we're seeing that starting to unfold. And so,
You're absolutely right on this, because I have to admit that for many years, when I read that portion of the scripture, for example in Zechariah, that all the nations will gather against Israel and bring their forces at the gate of Jerusalem, I thought that, I wonder, it looks so again incredible and distant. And now when I saw these news and images of Israel being taken to the ICJ and ICC, International Court of Justice, and I thought that, well, it doesn't look that incredible anymore, actually.
That's right. And to me, again, that's one of these sort of amazing things about prophecy, is that just when God speaks, we often view prophecy sort of through our own personal lens. If we can understand it, if we can figure it out, then maybe it makes sense. If I think that there's no possible way that this is going to happen, it can't be literal. But again, that's us processing what the actual words of God based on my very, very limited knowledge of my life here on this earth and my understanding of who God is. And of course, God is far above those types of things. And again, if the nation of Israel has shown us anything in the last 76, 77 years, is that God is doing exactly what he said he's going to do in the way that he said he was going to do it, and in his own time frame. So at some point we'll be able to look back and we'll be able to read some of these scriptures again, like some of what my photo books are about, is going, oh, this wasn't at all a mystery. This wasn't difficult to understand. I just didn't understand it because I didn't think it could happen. And ultimately, it's not what I think, it's what God thinks. And again, like part of the Bible, part of having that in our life is not how do I fit the Bible into my life? It's how do I shape my life to believe what God said he's going to do? Like that, regardless across the board, I think all believers would agree on that. We want to shape our lives based on what God says and what he says he will do, not try to form God into something that makes sense to me so God fits within my box.
That's right. There was a time when everybody thought, almost everyone thought that Jewish people would never return back to their land and have a sovereignty there, and suddenly it was true. So, Doug, it was absolutely delightful to talk with you, and I'm looking forward to our time together here in Finland, beginning of September, and I want you to feel most welcome to our hopefully warm country at that time, but you will find people at least with warm and receptive hearts for what you have to share with us. And I'm looking forward to seeing all this photographic and video evidence and everything. And I hope you stay well. And we keep praying for you and for your upcoming visit. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. I'm very much looking forward to it, and spending some time in person and really just sharing a lot of what's happening. And that's, for me, it's part of the joy is like, let's put politics aside. Let's put sort of the news reports and some of those questions. Ultimately what it comes down to is, what is God doing in the earth? And he's told us ahead of time so that we can actually be a part of it. And there are roles that we can really step into to be a part of it, not choosing sides in terms of a political spectrum or, those types of current events, but God, how do I join with you in what you're doing at the end of the age? Because there are opportunities for that exact thing. And that's, again, some of what we'll be talking about in Finland, is not just these are the facts and this is what's going on. How do we respond? How can we, what do we do in these types of situations? And God has very clear answers for that as well. And that's some of what I can't wait to share with you and to share with everybody about. Here is an opportunity for us to be involved with the God of Genesis 1 in the culmination of the end of the age. And Israel is a significant part of that. And yet God is still offering to us, do you want to be a part of what I'm doing in my plan? These are ways, and this is what's going to be happening, and this is what you can do and how you can be a part of that. So to me, this is an exciting time, really, to be alive, that God would choose us to live in this day, in this age. And we're going to talk about all of that together when we're in Finland.